Taimu are flutes, shakuhachi, Japanese bamboo flutes, which were created by LaCosse in San Francisco, and with some input from me on the design and the kind of aesthetic that I was looking for in a flute.
So one of the most important things that influences the tone color of the shakuhachi is the bore width in relation to the length. Now, there's a window of bore width to length possibilities that will work to make a playable flute. If we go too far, too wide of a flute or too thin of a flute, then the tone suffers and the tuning suffers. What we're trying to do with Taimu is to make a flute that is as wide as possible, really pushing that limit of how wide it can be, yet still have a flute that plays in both registers and has a good, raw, breathy tone.
Now here's a conventional shakuhachi. This is 1.8 in length, normal diameter, and sounds like this. This is what we use for study and for playing classical Japanese music. The Taimu flutes, by contrast, can get to be much larger in diameter, longer, and wider in the bore region, as you can see by comparison here. To give a closer comparison, here are two flutes that are the same length. This is a conventional 2.4 shakuhachi. This is a Taimu. You can see that the bamboo of the Taimu is much bigger, and the hole of the bore is much larger. So the difference, practicality of tone, is conventional 2.4. Very focused tone. And in the Taimu, because of the wider bore, pitch will be actually a half step lower, A flat. And the tone is a lot deeper. We call it the foghorn sound, and that's what we're looking for, the sound of a foghorn.
So basically what we're trying to do with Taimu is to create a flute that has the widest bore possible, sometimes even wider than what's possible, and then make the necessary adjustments to bring everything into tune while still having a flute that has a raspy, earthy, complex tone.
Ken LaCosse and I were working on flutes together for maybe about 10 years.
The early experiments were basically very thin-bored flutes, but very long. So they were deep, but because the bore was so thin, the tone was very focused, very clean.
I'm also a collector of shakuhachi, and I started to realize that my favorite flutes were large-bored and sometimes lower in pitch than a conventional flute of the same size. I have some flutes going back to the Edo period which have these characteristics. I also got some flutes from a fellow in Japan named Gudo Ishibashi, who's a fantastic maker, and his flutes have much the same concept. And we started to look at these Edo period flutes and Ishibashi's flutes and to see what made them work that way and why they were so exciting to play.
Later, we experimented with opening up the width and discovered that the tone was just incredible.
So we started to make flutes that were even bigger, wider bored, and even more of this foghorn type effect than really any other flutes we had seen.
Now, once we realized that it was the bore width and not the length that we were interested in, we knew that we were heading in the right direction.
Now, physics are involved, so if you take it too far, you can't have an instrument that's in tune.
Now, we found that we can even push that limit a little bit further if we make some little adjustments in the bore at certain spots. If we can pull it off, it gives us the advantage of making a wider bore, and then that will give us even more of a breathy, ephemeral, complex tone.
So we were not bound by convention, we decided to be bound by physics, and just taking this particular concept to the extreme that's possible. And we found it.
It's the sound. You can feel it as well as hear it. I go to the beach a lot and play in front of the ocean, and it's loud. And sometimes I don't hear the flute so much as feel it in my body. There's a vibration, which is nice and really satisfying. So it's something that you experience throughout your whole body and not just with your ears. I think that's it for me.
Well, one of the things that they use to describe shakuhachi playing as an ideal is that ideally it should sound like wind through the bamboo. So you get that kind of a sound more readily. I'll use this large Taimu. Now I'll play a similar phrase on a conventional 1.8 shakuhachi. To me, the Taimu sound is much closer to the ideal of wind through the bamboo grove. The normal shakuhachi is a great musical instrument, and it's approaching the sound of the Western flute in some ways. So it's nice to play around with both extremes, and I don't like to really limit myself to one or the other. I play both. It seems that a lot of the people, particularly in the West, where we're not so much caught up in convention and tradition as they are in Japan, people are gravitating toward the shakuhachi as a meditation device.
Many of us, especially in the West, are looking for a natural way to approach the instrument.
So since the kind of people who are getting into shakuhachi in the West tend more to be interested in the Buddhism, Zen aspect, I think it's only natural that they're going to want to play these long, breathy flutes and the kind of music that's suited for that.
One of the things I love the most about shakuhachi is that there are so many ways to experience it. So I don't see Taimu as a replacement for conventional shakuhachi, but rather as a complement. It's just one other way to experience this incredible instrument.
So I see it as a big growth market, especially in the West, which is where we're located, so we know the people and we can spread this idea fairly easily.
And I think that many of us have a desire to get back to the basics of sound, breath, music, and nature. That's shakuhachi.